out of respect for everyone's time, I think we are going to go ahead and get started. Good morning, welcome. Those of you who don't know me, my name is Chris Kramer. I am the city manager here at Cherry Hills Village. I am also the development director. It's a small organization. We wear a few around here. We do have quite a few representatives of the city, and with all of you here, I think when I get done, and Ethan will maybe do some introductions, so here, so you know who else is here among your colleagues. But I want to thank you for coming. Hopefully this is helpful for you, and this allows you to, we can give you some information today that will allow you to have a smoother process here at Cherry Hills Village. We want our processes to be as friendly as possible, and residents who are applying for a building permit, and these are contractors, and sometimes our customers are the neighbors who don't want these projects. We have to help all those folks because they're all our customers, but make no mistake, we want your processes to go as smoothly and possible while still meeting all the requirements of the code. So it has been a couple of years since we were able to have this in person, so we're excited to be back again. There's an agenda over there. It's a full day, and it's a couple of hours. We are going to hopefully go through some building code issues, state asbestos issues, some planning and zoning issues, and we're going to have information for you that hopefully helps you out when you go through our processes. At the end of each one of those sections, we also want to hear from you. We want to get your feedback, suggestions, clarifying questions, whatever it might be. So at the end of each one of those sections, we want to provide time for you to let us know what you think, or ask any questions you might have about our process or requirement. So again, thank you for coming. I'm going to turn it over to our MC for the day, which is going to be Ethan. My guess is everybody in the audience knows Ethan, right? Yes. And no introductions are needed. So I will let Ethan take it from.
I was going to say, I see a few familiar faces. But thank you for those who I've probably emailed you, and I just haven't seen your face before. But thank you all very much for coming. Before we do thank you very much for coming. And before I run through the agenda, just have a lot of people here, and I'm not sure if all of you have met our consultants or city staff. We'd like everybody to go around the room and introduce themselves. We'll start with our planning manager, Paul. He'll introduce himself, and then we'll our consultants, and then we'll run some mics around to you guys so we can.
I'm going to try this mic, make sure it works. Good morning, everyone. Again, I want to echo thank you for coming. And I want to reiterate what Chris was saying. At the end of the day, our job, the collective our job, is that requirements are met, and that doesn't mean 12 different review cycles to get things like this, and phone calls, emails, meetings, that kind of stuff is always make time for. Please feel free to reach out to us at any point. Again, my name is Paul Workman. I'm the manager and floodplain administrator. So again, thanks all for coming.
Morning, my name is Dean Height. I'm with Architecture in
Jamie Seitz with Mesa Properties.
Barry Cohen, I'm an,
My name is Tyler Gomez, and I'm a homeowner.
Kevin Greenman, Greenman Building.
Bridges with Cadre General.
My name is Nick Lawhorn with Bell Plumbing and Heating.
Thank you.
Dick Tanner with Tanner Custom.
Eisenmenger with AJ Kirkgard. Gallagher, City. Russell Stewart, Mayor.
And my name is Marcio, and I'm a homeowner with a.
Terry Thomas, I'm with Shomes Coda Associates. I am now doing the inspection line for Cherry Hills Village.
Severin, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself, please?
I'm Will Wilhelm with Kimley.
Thomas with Shums Coda Associates.
I'm Chuck DeVores. I do most all of the plan review here except for the energy review, and Gil is in somewhere. He's on Zoom call, so he'll be joining us a little bit. I do all the plan review on the assistant building.
Job is basically
Thank you, everybody, and thank you all once again for attending. We wouldn't be here without you. In fact, you're why we're here. So, thank you very much. Before I dig into our agenda, I do want to get to the important things. The food is in the back, if you would like some. Also, there's handouts on the side to help with asbestos, building regulations, as well as some zoning regulations. So real briefly, going over agenda, we're doing our welcome right now. As Severin mentioned, he'll jump into his Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment for asbestos and lead updates. Then we'll turn it over to Shums Coda Associates, our building division. Our building official, Steve Thomas, is going to talk about the 2021 building adoption and what updates that will be happening with that adoption. Take a brief break for 5 to 10 minutes. After the break, Kimley Horn, our engineering consultant, we'll go over the Arapahoe County Stormwater Management Manual code changes, as well as our drainage and stormwater plan requirements. After Kimley Horn, Paul and myself will do some zoning and planning guidelines. After that, that's really the end of the large session. We do have another break planned, and we'll jump into Gil Rossmiller from Shums Coda Associates. He's currently on Zoom, but he's going to go over some mechanical and help you guys out, as that's a hot topic. With that said, can't thank you enough all very much. Thank you, Councilor Gallagher and Mayor Stewart, for coming as well. With that, I will turn it over to Severin McGowan.
Good morning, everybody. I'm going to try to keep to the agenda. I'm first up off of the bat, so there's a lot of slides here and there's a lot of information. I'm not going to really only pertain, or actually not gonna only just do updates, we're gonna go through some information sections, permitting. We have a good variety of individuals here, contractors, homeowners as well, so there's a lot of information that we're gonna go over. Feel free to reach out to me, not address your questions today. All those handouts over there, a lot of those are from CDPHE. We have those on our website as well. So here we go. We're going to be talking about asbestos-lead demolition requirements. We work for the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment for the Air Pollution Control Division in the Indoor Environment Program. We're going to go over a brief regulatory review. We're going to talk about asbestos inspections, permitting, recent changes to Regulation 8, and then we're going to talk about, if we can get to it, Reg 19, which is the lead regulation. All right, the definition of asbestos-containing materials are materials that are greater than 1% asbestos. This is directly out of the reg. It's our definition of when you have to have an inspection. So you have prior to renovation or demolition. Going to be disturbing greater than the trigger levels of asbestos-containing materials or suspect asbestos. Some of the suspect-containing materials within residential buildings or within commercial buildings can be floor tiles, mastics, roofing felts, roofing mastics. You have TSI, thermal system insulation. I mean, almost everything is a suspect asbestos-containing. So just be aware of that. It doesn't matter really when the building was built. Asbestos has never been fully banned in the United States. The newer the build, probably the less likely you'll have asbestos, but it's still a potential. Aware of that. Really, there's only a handful of materials that are not a suspect material. That could be metal, wood, glass. However, when you talk about metal and wood, there could be metal products that have an asbestos-containing material that are located, pressed in between the metal sheets, or you could have pressed wood that also can be comprised of asbestos. So just be fully aware of that. There's so much asbestos out there, it's crazy. All right, if you do not know if the materials are asbestos, you must assume that they're asbestos-containing, or you have to have an inspection to prove that they're non-detect. Talked about how you have to be greater than 1% asbestos to be called asbestos-containing material. There's another guideline. You also have to exceed the trigger levels of suspect asbestos-containing materials to be regulated by CDPHE. Those trigger levels are broken down into two different types of structures. We have the single-family residential dwelling, and then we have our public and commercial structure. So on single family, we have 50 linear feet, 32 square feet, or the volume equivalent of a 55-gallon drum. The volume equivalent is usually used for materials that are off substrate that have already been impacted, and you cannot measure them. So pretty small. 32 square feet is a sheet of drywall, typical sheet of drywall. So if you're going to be exceeding greater than that in a residential dwelling, then you are required to have an asbestos inspection. Then during renovation or demolition on a public and commercial structure, you have to exceed 260 linear, 160 square, or the volume equivalent of a 55-gallon drum. All right, so we went over asbestos-containing materials and then the trigger levels. That prompts CDPHE's regulatory authority for the asbestos inspection. We have a guy coming out of a crawl space right there. All right, this is a really beneficial handout. I think the handout's over here. So I would recommend, if you haven't grabbed one of those handouts, to grab it. This is one of our newer handouts. It goes through the flow chart on when you have to have an asbestos inspection. You can reach out to the state. But this one is over there on the table, as well as being posted on our website. All right, so prior to doing remodeling, renovation, or demolition, you want to have an asbestos inspection. We also have a renovation and demolition fact sheet that goes over our trigger levels and has our contact information. It also goes into a little bit more detail if there are exclusions, and you could maybe meet those exclusions. Talked about the trigger levels, and if those will be exceeded. Buildings of any age, even newer builds, if you guys are tearing out materials, you most likely need to have an asbestos inspection, or you have to have some exempt information from the architect or engineer who. We have this date of October 12th, 1988. There is no official cutoff date for asbestos, but that is a date that was put into regulation. If the building was built after that date, you could potentially avoid having the asbestos inspection. But just so you all know, I've been at the state for about 8 years now, and I've only seen maybe 2 or 3 individuals who've been able to provide the information necessary to get the exemption from the asbestos inspection. If you are the original builder and your client and your homeowner, they request that documentation from you, you would be like signing a letter stating that to the best of your knowledge, you have not used asbestos-containing materials with the building of the structure. Also, you would want to provide some supplemental documentation. That could be like specs from the information or from the building materials that you have used. You want to keep all that. But we have a form that you all could fill out, or anybody can fill out and send that to us that could potentially exempt you from the inspection requirement. All right, all suspect asbestos-containing materials have to be assumed or require sampling, as we've discussed. Okay, who conducts the asbestos inspection? They're conducted by certified asbestos building inspectors in the state of Colorado. They also are employed by the asbestos consulting firm. So they must work for an asbestos consulting firm that's registered with the state, and they have to be a certified asbestos building. They will conduct the inspection, and then they'll provide the asbestos inspection report. Again, if all samples are non-detect, then CDPHE does not have any additional requirements. You do have to have that asbestos inspection report on site during all your renovation. Find this information on our website. Give you a second if you want to write it down. Otherwise, you can just do a Google search. Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment. Type in the search asbestos. It should bring you to our homepage. It'll give you all of our contact information. You all can reach out whenever you want to. The inspection reports have to include a couple of information. It's more than just lab data. Sometimes we get just lab data sent to us, like if a homeowner took their own samples or somebody else took their own samples. We can't disallow individuals from taking their own samples, but those are only used for knowledge, informational purposes. They cannot determine the scope of work. They can't be used for renovation. So you always want to hire that asbestos consulting firm. It'll include the inspector's name, certification number, a bunch of other things, registration number, their description. Basically, they've been provided what the scope of work is, and they've sampled accordingly. They'll have a physical description of the components to be inspected. They'll include diagrams, locations of the asbestos-containing materials. They'll highlight that information. They'll include assessments of friability, their summary of findings, and the so there's a couple of types of inspections. You could have a limited inspection if you're doing like a bathroom remodel. You could have a comprehensive inspection if the structure is going to be a complete scrape and demolished. So limited inspections are isolated to the areas that are going to be impacted during your project. And then comprehensive is top down, inside out, everything that's suspect gets sampled, or it must be assumed. So we have examples of like a limited inspection could be a partial demolition, specific component, bathroom, kitchen remodel. Comprehensive, complete scrape, full demo. Permitting, we're going to go through this pretty quickly. We talked about it a little bit already. We have a asbestos building inspector who works for the asbestos consulting firm. They conduct an inspection and sample accordingly. They provide that inspection report to their client. That's it. If you're not doing demo, then you can skip to the following steps at the end. Otherwise, you'll have to hire a general abatement contractor. They're the ones who are allowed to do asbestos abatement in the state of Colorado. They will submit a permit to the division for review. with the payment. Once the application is approved, the general abatement contractor will receive the stamped approved application, and then they conduct the work during those dates that are approved. If there's a friable asbestos abatement project, then there is a requirement for an air monitoring specialist. They're a third-party consultant to come in and clear the area so it can be reoccupied. Demolition notification applications are submitted to the state after that. Again, if you don't have to have a general abatement contractor because you don't have asbestos, then you would skip to this step after you have the inspection. That demolition notification application is submitted to us for review and approval, and then it'll be issued to the contractor listed on the application. They'll complete the project during the required dates, and wanted to emphasize the definition of demolition as it is written in Colorado Reg 8. So that is the removal of load-bearing structural members, essentially. So interior renovation, you're not impacting load-bearing structural members. That would not count for demolition, so you would not be required to have a demolition notification. You would just have to have that asbestos inspection and keep that report on site. So examples, pop-top, structural walls, complete demo, and then every single structure that's coming down has to have its own demolition notification application submitted to the state. Some examples, what you could look for, the asbestos abatement permit. That is the official permit. However, we also have a stamped approved application
All right, folks, we're gonna settle back in, dive into some building code adoption. Before we jump into the next presentation, I do want to remind people that the handouts, if you need them, are on the table. Among the handouts, you'll find a survey that if you don't mind taking, it just helps us give feedback on what you guys are looking for. We can provide a better service to you guys. You'll also find, I put some cards for myself as well as our planning manager, Paul Workman. Please feel free to grab one. Today is not the only chance you have for questions. If you have questions at any time, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. We like the conversations, help your submittals, because it helps us review. So with that said, I'm going to welcome Steve Thomas, our building official from Shums Code Associates, and he's going to go over the 2021 IRC significant changes.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome. As everybody said, it's great to have everybody here. I'm going to be going over the changes from the 2018 to the 2021 International Residential Code, and kind of go over just the building code side, and then Gil's going to talk more about the energy code and mechanical. So, quick, my name's Steve Thomas. I'm the contract building official for Cherry Hills, have been since I've seen. Awesome to still see people still building in Cherry Hills. It's a great place to be a building department. So, been doing codes. I'm very involved in the code development process. In fact, I spent a week last week in Rochester, New York at the IRC code hearings for the 24 code. So I'm going to be talking about the 21 today, and we're already changing things. So it's always a moving target and those kind of things. That kind of stuff is going on. So we're just going to talk about chapters 1 through 10, basically the building code side of the code, and give you some intent, impact of the change, how to use it. That's how I like to present codes, is how do we use the code. First one, I don't know, we may see this in Cherry Hills, I don't know. I thought about maybe putting it in, not putting it in. We now have provisions in both the residential code and the building code for intermodal shipping container buildings. So if you want to build a home out of shipping containers, we now have provisions to do that in the code. It's no longer an alternate design. Most of it is structural, and should be interesting to see how that works. And some people go, oh, I hate shipping containers. Oh, that's the way to go. So definitely a thing that we're going to be looking at. Emergency escape and rescue openings. Just some clarification that of course, we have to have emergency egress windows out of basements, and then if you have one or more sleeping rooms, one in each sleeping room, pretty much. But then it talks about when I get out of that window well, I have to have at least 36 inches of open space, yards, to get to the street or the public way. So it's probably not going to be an issue with our setbacks in Cherry Hills, but if you're building in other jurisdictions, you got a little tighter setbacks, that could be an issue. And there's some exceptions if that you can't get to it, but it still opens up to a yard that gets you to there. So if I can't go one way, I can go the other way, and it has to be at least 36. It doesn't have to be a defined path. It just needs to be open so that somebody that's needing to get out or the fire department needing to get in can get to it and get people out of that house. We have a new provision for alterations, which I think is really good because it really clarifies. And over the years, I'm sure you remember how difficult it was and how different jurisdictions would look at, okay, if you're doing a remodeling or an alteration in a house, what do I have to do with the egress window? And so if I create a new sleeping room, I got to have an egress window. That's right. But it says that other than new sleeping rooms or existing basements are undergoing alterations, you don't have to have an egress window. Right? So if you take, for example, we take a basement, we are going to do basement's going to be all family room, theater, no sleeping room. You don't have to provide an egress window. Add a sleeping room, now you got to do something. And there's an exception that says you can comply with 310.7.1 for that. And that basically says that we can get an operable window and comply with a couple of requirements. First one is, existing operable windows have to provide a net clear opening of 4 square feet. Clear with the requirements of the residential code, egress windows are supposed to provide 5.7 square feet net clear opening. Right? This is saying, okay, if you're replacing one, that we're going to let you go down to 4 square feet as long as you've got at least a 22 by 20 opening. So the theory here is that we don't have to start cutting foundations and redoing. So it was an effort to make it a little easier, more reasonable in how we enforce the code. You know what it's like to start cutting a foundation. So replacement window is the largest standard size that will fit in the rough opening. And you can use your existing rough opening, and it's permitted to be the same operating style. My preference, to be honest with you, would be, hey, let's get it as close as we can. It's got a slider in it, but a casement that makes the opening and gets people out. That's really what we're trying to do, is emergency path out of the building. So a lot of changes going on with how we look at stairways. Kind of an interesting one. I have dealt with this before we had it. So it starts out by saying that, okay, if you provide a stair, it has to comply with 311.7. Size, run, width, handrails, all those kind of things. Then we added some exceptions. Because in the past, it was kind of mixed between the definition of the stairway and within 311. So this was actually tried to clarify what we're trying to do. First thing is stairways not within or serving a building porch or deck. What we're worried about is stairways in the building, in the house, serving the house, right? Off the deck, off the front porch, whatever. What we're not worried about, stairs out in the garden, right? Or in the backyard. Code's not going to cover those. So we're not going to look at them, but I'm going to recommend we'll comply with the code. Because when somebody falls down those stairs, not if, when somebody falls down those stairs, who are they going to sue? Okay, right? So the courts are going to say, hey, of care in the building of those stairs. You should have complied with the code. Rise, run, the whole bit. Building code's not going to look at them. Not within or serving. Then it talks about stairways leading to non-habitable attics, right? The old pull-down stairs. Have we ever worried about pull-down stairs complying with stair requirements? Oh, but somebody somewhere said, well, the code says all stairs have to comply. So we went, no, that's not really. Same thing with stairways going to crawl spaces. Same kind of thing. You want to do a shift ladder down into the stair or into the crawl space? Perfectly fine. An architect called once and said, hey, I'm going to have a little problem. We've got a jurisdiction that is calling us on the head height, stair going down into our crawl space, not a basement. The old code. And I said, guess what? They're right. The code says that's a stair. It's in the building. It's got a cover. And I like it. So where you got that stair going down into the crawl space, permitted, doesn't have to comply with the code. Or you could do alternating tread device, risers, treads, head height, all those kind of things. So I think a good clarification in the slope of the treads, 148. Okay, we want to make sure that it drains, especially exterior slope. So that was existing language, and then we added a section that said, an exception that says, okay, the landing Required elsewhere in the code to drain surface water, the walking surface can be 1 in 20. Right? The direction of travel. That's the same thing as what we would talk about a walking surface in the commercial. Don't want to see this, right? Where that landing just kind of drops off. Especially here in Colorado. Can you imagine what would happen when you get to the bottom of those stairs? Down. Okay. Relatively flat, but we can go 1 in 20. That's still pretty. All right. Smoke alarms. Lots of stuff going on with smoke alarms. Those of you who used to work under, anybody ever heard of the uniform building? Right? Yeah. Remember that thing? Well, we're putting stuff back in from the UVC, believe it or not. This was in NFPA 72 and the instructions for smoke alarms, but it's knocked back into the code. But basically, and this is really going to have an impact on our homes, I believe. I have a hallway, and the room open to the hallway has a ceiling height that exceeds 24 inches from the hallway. So I got a coffered ceiling, right? How many times do we have those in our homes? All the time. If that exceeds 24 inches above the hallway ceiling height, we need to put a smoke alarm in that coffered ceiling now. So, yep, it's going to look ugly. We know that. But that's where the smoke's going to go. All up and fill in that space. We want to make sure that that activates and notifies. More than 24 inches, architects, the secret. Okay. So it was kind of an interesting one that I'd never heard of this. So usually not a problem in our homes, but there's requirements for location of smoke alarms in relationship to permanent, or not permanent, but cooking appliances. Right? 20 feet, 10 feet, something like that. Then we got a new exception that says if you have a smoke alarm that is listed and marked, helps reduce cooking nuisance alarms, you can be within 6 feet of the cooking. Never heard of this type of smoke. I went, oh, that's kind of cool. So I did a little searching. Of course, you know, you always search all knowing Google, right? So, trying to not activate on. Real quick, let me go back. What's going on with smoke alarms? There's some new changes coming up that were discussed about the sounding of the alarm, of going to a lower lower hertz, so 520 hertz alarms, because we find that people don't wake up sometimes, with obnoxious as they are. We have some people that just don't wake up. I remember my son, teenager, we could go in and yell and scream and sing. So they have done some studies and found that this lower hertz alarms will wake people up, or if they're inebriated. So that's new technology coming on. It's now required in the commercial side. In residential, it's not required in the IRC at this point. There is a movement to get that in. Discussed it last week, and the fact is, right now, the smoke alarm manufacturers don't have any device. We put something into the code before they actually have the device made, so you know what's coming up. All right, solar, BIPVs, building integrated photovoltaic. The pathways that are required around the PV panels, right, 3 foot on the edge, 3 foot edge, all those kind of things. If we have a BIPV system where the removal or cutting of any of that system, right, so the solar shingles, for example, those are listed that can be cut, and they don't have to have the path around them. The whole idea of the path is to get firefighter access up onto the roof and to be able to ventilate the roof. That's the whole idea. but they make some of these IPV systems where they don't, you can cut them and you don't get the whole problem with the same thing with egress windows. By the way, if you have a question I'm going through, just yell at me and we'll see what I can do. All right, habitable attics. All right. Big discussion. And we have habitable attics in the and we all know that the IRC is limited to 3 stories in height. But been provisions that said, okay, you can do a habitable attic at another level. So it looks like 4 stories, but it's not a 4-story building, it's only a 3-story attic. Well, the language that we had was really bad, and people were taking advantage. Fire service is going, wait a minute, time out. Never looked at these homes to be 4 levels in height. Standpoint of rescue and firefighting capabilities, all those kind of things. So, did a whole big revision to the habitable attic thing. And so, first of all, it has to meet the requirements of 304, which is 70 square feet, right? Minimum floor area. Ceiling height in accordance with 305. Then it says, okay, with beams and all that kind of stuff. Habitable attic shall be considered a story above grade plane. Before it said we're not a story. Now we're going to say, well, it's a story. Except, it would give us the exceptions taken. Habitable attic shall not be considered a story above grade plane, provided you meet a couple of conditions. First of all, it's not greater than 1/3 of the floor area of the story below. Sort of like a mezzanine, exactly. Okay? But it's half. Or 1/3, I'm sorry, of the floor. Mezzanine is 1/3 of the room that it opens into. Now we're going to say, okay, 1/3 of the floor. So let's say I got, I don't know, 3,000 square feet on my floor below. I can have a 1,000 square foot habitable attic. Okay? And not greater than, or not greater than 1/2 of the floor area if the building is provided with fire sprinklers. Right? In Cherry Hills, we require sprinklers, so you could go up to 1/2 of the area of the floor below and be a habitable attic. And it's not a story. And it says the occupied space has to be enclosed by a roof assembly above, 3 walls, knee walls, floor ceiling assembly below. Floor of the habitable attic can't extend past exterior walls of the building. I'm going to leave this out. It has to be like an attic. And if it's located above the 3rd story, the dwelling has to be sprinkled. That's now what that does to the height limitations in the zoning code. Different story, because we're still going to have to comply with the height requirements as well. So just something to keep in mind. Of questions on habitable attics? Definitely an option. Habitable attics have to have a means of egress in accordance with R311. So regular stairs, spiral stairs. All right, I see this as a big thing coming into Cherry Hills. Energy storage system. All right, so whole bunch of new language, and I'm not going to go into the details of everything. I'm just going to let you know it's there about having stationary storage battery systems. All right, so if you got a PV system and you want to actually use it for power in the home, we now have a provision for that storage system for you. The NEC, all those kind of things have to be listed. Talks about protection of the system so that we are new language for stationary engine generators. Got a lot of generators in this city. going in. And so this is going to be really helpful to make sure. It basically just says they have to be listed. So, and installed, of course, the NEC. We have stationary fuel cell power systems, same kind of thing. It's got to comply with 1206 of the fire code as well. It's been a big move in codes for all of these new energy. So some good. Vapor retarder. Yeah, what I call a yo-yo requirement. Yo-yo requirements or something goes in the code and then back out of the code. I hate it because it makes us look like doofus. So the 6 mil vapor retarder underneath the concrete slab going to 10 mil. Okay. And like I said, last week I was at the IRC hearings and there was a proposal, and I can't remember what happened with it, that puts it back to 6 mil. Right? So, or some kind of classification. The whole idea, and we had a great discussion with a gentleman, his name is Joe Stiebrick with the Building Science Corporation, that great building science about this whole subject. And he said it really doesn't matter. The big issue is how puncture proof is the plastic. Okay? And so, and it's more to keep moisture from getting up into the concrete and into. So we'll see what happens. We may, when we do the adoption, we may just pull back and say if it's going to be that way in the 24, we'll just keep in mind. No, he said doesn't matter. Classification, that's what the change was. Classification A, B, and C versus rating, puncture. And all the guys pouring concrete are walking around with their golf shoes, right? Want information on moisture in buildings? This guy's name is Joe Stiebrick. His last name.
Buildingscience.com is where you go.
There you go. Buildingscience.com. Thanks, Gil.
Not a problem.
Voice from above. Right? So, and free research papers on everything, right? Attic ventilation, crawl space ventilation, vapor retarders, everything. It's all free. We already paid for it, by the way, right? Because he does a lot of stuff for the federal government. So a lot of really good information. Right. Yeah, he will give you an opinion, by the way. He also does seminars on the. All right, lots of stuff happening with decks. Over the last couple of cycles, you've added a lot of language. Actually, added a whole section on decks, and so it's great because we can just look at that section. It covers materials that we see in decks and those. So the change was that the design has to be based on either the live load, be 40 pounds per square foot, or the ground snow load indicated in R301.2, whatever's greater. Now our snow load's 30, so we'll go back to 40. But if you're building in the mountains, where you got 100-pound snow load, with the higher footings, a couple exceptions added. We don't have to have footings for freestanding decks that bear right on the precast concrete pier blocks. How long have those been around? Right? Those have never been permitted by the code. I have a saying that if we took all the illegal stuff out of Home Depot and Lowe's, half the size that they are. Mine when you're plumbing stuff, right? So Joists bear directly on the precast concrete piers. The area of the deck doesn't exceed 200 square feet, and you're not more than 20 inches above grade at any point within 30. So if you want to do one of those little decks out in the middle of the yard, come on those precast. Deck footings have to be at least 12 inches below the undisturbed ground surface if you're going to do that kind of a block. So if it's attached to the house, remember it's got to meet the frost protection. There you go. Attach the frost protected structure, has to extend below that, erected on solid rock or some other approved method. Deck posts, we have a new table. That's probably the biggest thing, is a prescriptive design of decks. And so it gives you deck sizes, span. Now we've got post deck or deck post heights. Beam spans for 40 pounds, different kind of materials, including redwood. So redwood framing. If you're doing treated lumber, SPF, follow these tables. You don't have to do any engineering. That's the whole idea of the IRC, is that it's a prescriptive code. You can build it under this code. You don't have to get it engineered. Most of our homes are large enough and they're engineered. But, you know, if you came to us and said, hey, we want to build a deck and we're going to use this table, perfect. Joist spans, same kind of, got joist spacing for wood decking. They're using 1.5 or 2 inch thick wood decking materials, give you the maximum spans. All of that using deck ledger connection. A lot of discussion on how do we put that ledger on the side of the house. What size lag screws or lag bolts or whatever we're going to use. Fashion, it's all based on the live load. About it. 12 years ago, we had nothing. How many lag bolts you need to. We just did what we thought was right. Now we've gotten some engineering done and speaking of that, guardrails. Guard loads have to be transferred to the deck. I'll know that, right? A lot of discussion going on about how we connect the prescriptive designs put in, but it wasn't approved, so it's just some generic terms to do that. So guards are connected to the deck joists or beams. They have to be connected to the adjacent joist to prevent rotation of the joist or beam. Relying on fasteners and grain are not permitted. So, closure. I build a deck. I'm an old framer. So I did the end nailing of the rim onto the joist and post, 4 feet, the whole bit. And of course, initial inspection, it passed, right? Because how do we test the 200-pound load guard, right? We lean on it or shake it. The inspector go over and shake the guard. That's what they're doing. They're checking that 200. So it worked fine. Years later, I go out on the deck, I lean a guard, and guess what? Moved. Shrinkage, right? I had to go back in and attach everything. So now it's nice. So when I work as an expert witness on construction defect lawsuits, this is one of the big things that come up all the time. Deck rails not being designed. They'll bring engineers in and do design. Be careful about how you're connecting those guards to the deck. If they're attached on top of the guard, have to be connected to the deck framing or blocking and installed in accordance with the manufacturer's instructions. You know who that manufacturer is, don't you? Old Simpson, right? Or USP. I'll use USP. But anyway, that's what we're talking about. Where 4x4 wood posts support guards. Can't notch them. It's all the time, right? We're not as much as we used to. Well, to take that 4x4, notch it, now it's just a 2x4. What I need is a volunteer, because I'm going to take a 2x4 and I'm going to take 2 lag bolts and put it into this table and let it extend out here 36 inches. I need somebody that weighs at least 200 pounds to stand out here. Break. So that's why the code's now saying, hey, plastic composite guards are illegal in Cherry Hills. No, I'm just kidding. But they're not illegal. If you want to use them, you can. But they have to comply with 50722, which says install for the manufacturers. Other guards, same thing, need to comply with manufacturer's instructions. All kinds of stuff. There is some discussion going on about cable guards. Right? Everybody loves to use cable guards. My opinion is they're fine. The discussion is, what about how much pressure do I need to go through with the 4-inch sphere? And so there was a lot of discussion last week about that. I'm almost come to the opinion that no pressure. In fact, there was a code change. But my recommendation is that you follow manufacturer's instructions, which says put them at about 3 inches on center, depending on the cable thickness. Whatever system you're using, just from a standpoint of liability more than anything else, I want to look at those, see what happens with that one. I know you were going to get an update on. All right, this is going to be a fun one. You're all going to love this one. Garage doors now have to have labels on them. Okay? Make sure you start talking to your garage door suppliers and say, hey, we know this is coming. What is this? And so manufacturer has to have a label on the door, has to identify the manufacturer, the door model, series number, the positive and negative design pressures, the installation instruction drawings, reference number, and the applicable test. So why? Microbursts, high winds, tornadoes. Think about even when we had the tornado up in Windsor, we found that a lot of those homes we lost started with losing the garage door. The wind knocks out the garage door, picks up the garage, grabs the garage, tosses it, and brings the house. Or we just lost the garage. Things happen. Number one, the garage door wasn't designed to handle the wind. Number two, the portal frames on each side of the openings weren't right. A lot of the damage we saw up in Windsor. So make sure you talk to your suppliers and go, hey, this is coming. Make sure that. Yeah, that's going to be a fun one. We'll have to. May have to get some kind of engineering or something. Right, barn doors. So that's a great question. Not sure when we're going to start the adoption process. We've got to do some investigation and that kind of stuff. Council is the one that makes the final decision. Make recommendations and see what they want to do. And we're always open to your input. That's why we're doing this now. That you can say, hey, can you maybe look at that? Now, I am not a big amendment person. I like as few amendments as possible. But occasionally, have any thoughts or those kind of things, please definitely take it under guarantees, but we'll take it under. No amendment saying delete all of the IRC. Minimum wind load design for vinyl siding. For those of you doing vinyl siding, some new wind. Then we have a whole new section on soffits. Last week we had a code change in a definition of a soffit. Many of you know what a soffit is. Yeah. I actually testified. What was the one I tested? Oh, there's a code change to define landing. Landing is. Right? Anyway. So now we have all kinds of information about the installation of soffits, whether it's vinyl, wood sheathing, metal, cementitious panels, all those kind of things. Talks about wind pressures, and it's all wind-based, so that we don't lose that soffit and those kind of things. Whole new section. So you've got general wind limitations, line pressures at 30 pounds. Then BIPVs, a new exception that Class A, B, or BIPV products have to be installed if we're within 3 feet of the lot line. You're in a wildfire area as well. Probably we will not look at that here in Cherry Hills. I don't see the fire. Concrete and clay tile. We do a little bit of that here. Start saying that you got to do that over solid sheathing. We have a new exception. It says you can do it over space sheathing in seismic design category A, B, and C, and we are category B. So if the manufacturer has installation instructions on space sheathing, but remember you got to make sure you follow manufacturer's instructions. Wind resistant for metal roof shingles, same as asphalt shingles. So we have to make sure it's in accordance with ASTM 3161. There the labels is all that. A lot of metal. Tile and concrete. And that gives you the listing. We're at 160 mile an hour winds. Got to be ASTM. All right. Does that work? Okay. Questions on what I covered? Chris, you okay? Or any questions about building department? How we can do things better? Oh, sorry. We've got to get the microphone too.
Would any require changes on?
Oh, no, we're not going to talk about electrical. I'm sorry. So, you know, the problem with electrical is that the electrical portion of the residential code is written by NFPA based on NEC. Now, the state says we have to use the 2020. Any specific questions that?
Just a lot.
Yes, my understanding is that the state has, I believe the state's come out with a decision that because it's creating such a problem, you don't have to provide that GFCI. So for sensors and top on the GFCI. But my understanding is that I believe it started with NFPA.
This has been coming up.
Where's Jay?
I think I can answer that one. Yeah, there has been a few that have come through drains in the garage. And the original plan just shows, show where it's going, pipe or anything like that. And then we went to manager and decided what to do on this. As long as they're shown on the plans. 2 seconds, I can pull up that. Yeah, it has to drain. You have to show it draining to a open space on the property that's and yeah, we have worked through that now. Water management is what goes in the garage. Yeah, I think we've got that handled.
Yeah, just from the city perspective, our big thing is making sure that it doesn't drain out into, that gets us in trouble with our, and so you're gonna have to show that it is on the property.
And Ken, I can send you our updated policy. In short, we don't want anything draining into the sanitation or sanitation districts normally don't support it because the treatment plant. Really, you end up daylighting it into. Correct.
Up the handout. Slide is my contact. The questions? Has been dripped, so. All right, thank you.
Thanks, Steve. Appreciate it. We're going to jump into Kimberly Horn's presentation, if you guys are all good. They're going to talk about drainage and stormwater requirements, as well as Arapahoe County Stormwater Management Manual.
How everybody's doing? Wilhelm with Kimberly Horn. Probably these two questions come up the most. All the questions, so if you have additional ones, we hoping maybe to have an update on the Arapahoe County manual updates. We reached out to them prior to this meeting. Don't have a schedule yet of those updates with a goal. than that at this meeting, but we, provide written updates of how. So I think probably stormwater is the number one issue. I'm gonna let Shelby. That one is floodplains. On it, just to, mark some ideas so that if you, that you sort of know. Start with floodplain management, that quickly, processes, and then stormwater requirements. Cover, and then hopefully have some Q&A. Floodplain management, this is a map of the Jersey village, and there in color is jurisdictional floodplain. So I think there's a lot of confusion about floodplains. What does that mean? Really, floodplain management flows down through the federal code. So although you may have gone through this process in Denver or another jurisdiction of having to get a floodplain development permit, it will be different by every local jurisdiction. However, there'll be some common. Specific to floodplain development, just a really quick flag, and on the right side of the screen there are two links. They are great resources. Start a project on a property. So Google digital flood maps. Probably get this link, but this image you can put in your address and it'll pop up a digital flood map to show if there's a helping you more in the planning process as you move into site modifications. You're probably getting a certain floodplain, that's floodplain or a floodway, then that should be a red flag to you. Project that you need to get a site engineer involved and start thinking about. Good, great resource if you're like, there's a floodplain on my property, you can put the portal, you should get pretty much. And I would definitely recommend as you're starting a project to understand, do I have a floodplain on my project? So if you have a floodway, and I'll show you a map, I would say floodplain or floodway. Encroachments are prohibited, exceptions are prohibited, including fill, new construction, financial improvements, other development, and that word development is important, and adopted, regulated. Is I want to build a new fence, is that going to require inside the floodplain, is that going to coordinate with the any decks, patios, secondary structures? Those would all be considered development, and you will put it into the floodplain article 5, sorry. I was saying you need to bring in, unless it has been demonstrated through hydraulic analysis before Colorado professional engineer, in accordance with standard engineering practice, RISE certification. Why is this? Why are we trying to make this? So that federal code and customers are not only the developer, the property owner that wants to develop, but making sure there's large from a. That's sort of the why. I know there's some confusion and maybe some frustrations with want to do something simple inside the floodplain, but why about protecting of the community and main. This is from Arapahoe County, where it shall be provided between the 100-year structures. So the floodplain may be over here, your house is outside the floodplain, just make sure environment, and that's too. And we see and show the base flood elevation and flood. Map. And we're gonna. So if you Google a property and you'll get this area there with the striped floodway, and then you'll see aqua area, the blue. Because Cherry Hills Village has a more development code than other jurisdictions. Developing in the blue line, you will still have to size, which probably means 8 or Mile High Flood District, which falls within, obviously, not allow any residential structures with floodways. That's a no. At the floodplain, at a barn, a fence, back to the one and would process. And there is no permit in Cherry edging and bank stable. Through that process, you know it's time out of these floodplains. Just a good question that comes up a lot is that area in orange. That's an informational thing. For most projects, that isn't a regulatory. Does anybody have any questions? A lot all day on of how to the whole village goes through an audit. Of the process. What occurred.
Well, excuse me. I just wanted to add to that one of the reasons why we are so strict with floodplain and basically anything in the floodplain is the city participates in the community rating system through the federal government, through FEMA. And so that FEMA does an audit of everything we've done in the floodplain every year, and every 5 years they do a really in-depth audit where we basically have to provide them with everything. And based on a series of criteria, they assign points for what we allow, what we don't allow, what our regulations say, what they don't say. They add up those points and it equals a rating, 1 through 10. 1 is the best, 10 is the worst. And based on what that number is, then everybody in your jurisdiction gets a discount on their federal flood insurance. And so changes to that number can have real serious impacts to our residents paying flood insurance. And so because we are more strict in some ways than some other surrounding jurisdictions, we get additional points and it increases our CRS rating. And that's important to us as a community. And so if you have the opportunity to join us for development in the floodplain, you'll see that we do review those very, very closely, and that's why.
There are quite a few properties that are. Four of these is best lots have sort of developed, and now some of the lots that have floodplains so I mentioned this earlier, process is, basically a variance. Towards, want to go pursue that, then that's gonna take bring in an engineer that technical criteria met. When we get the most questions on, if I have to do stormwater, talk through some criteria with triggers that will trigger quality and how to be compliant with village and
There are two primary water quality is required. Following Mile High Flood District.
Thanks, Will. So since we're a little ahead on time, we're going to do another quick 5-minute break, allow people to take a short rest. When we come back, we'll dive into our planning and zoning update. After our planning and zoning, we'll check in with the group, see how you guys are doing. Might do another quick 5-minute break, and then we'll dive into Gil's mechanical and energy session. All right. All right. Now the exciting stuff, right? Well, thanks again for everybody who stuck around with us so far. Hopefully we can keep it interesting for you. Once again, my name is Ethan Westbrook. I'm with the Community Development Department. Paul Workman, our planning manager, and myself will be doing this presentation. For those who haven't called or emailed me before, a lot of the permitting process goes through me. Just to keep you guys informed, we do accept permits pretty much exclusively electronically. You can submit them in person if you'd like, but with that said, electronically really benefits you in that I can get it to my plan reviewers and consultants faster, which makes the timeline go faster for you guys. And to be honest, we see 99% of our contractors, architects, homeowners take advantage of the electronic process. It's really there in place to help you guys. Permits that do not require plan review, so your water heater replacement, AC, windows, doors, like-for-like replacements, those are processed within 1 to 3 business days of when we receive them. Permits that do require plan review, so your interior remodels, exterior remodels, new homes, guest homes, additions, really, I mean, we're exclusively residential, but pretty much everything else, they run in 10 business day review cycles. So a lot of you probably already know this, but just as a reminder, once we get your submittal, we make sure it's complete. Once it's complete, then it goes to our planning and zoning division first, if planning and zoning is needed. For example, interior remodels don't need any planning and zoning review, so those go straight to our building consultant. If planning and zoning is needed, it goes to us first, where that 10 business days then starts. If we have comments, then we will email you directly as the applicant, a comment letter and some red line plans with what we have. You guys will then be responsible for making sure those comments are resolved. Once we get your resubmittal, which must be a complete resubmittal, we won't take it in pieces, that 10 business day clock starts over. We do, and this goes, I'm speaking for all of us, we do our best to beat those 10 business day deadlines. We're not just going to sit on a project if we can get to it ahead of time. But depending on our workload and the intake that we're seeing, 10 business days is the latest you should hear. Yeah, right now. Right, and especially like right now, beginning of April, things are starting to pick up. So, and even within, I'm kind of segueing now, even with the pandemic, the last couple of years, we've been really busy. I think in 2020, December was our second busiest month, right in the dead of winter. So, and 2021 served the same. We processed 1,061 permit requests in 2021. So we joke around all the time that there's a busy season and a slow season. It's been busy ever since I started with Cherry Hills Village. So please be patient with us, but if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. You can always check in with any of us or our consultants on where they're at in their review process. Our average plan review guidelines, once again, these are dependent on the quality of the submittal as well as the response time of you guys getting back to us. If we don't hear back from an applicant within a month, then that can affect the timeline greatly. So for new single-family homes, guest homes, and major additions, the average timeline from submittal date to permit issuance date is 12 to 14 weeks. Minor additions is 4 to 8 weeks. Accessory and recreational structures is 4 to 8 weeks. exterior remodels 4 to 6 weeks, interior remodels 2 to 4 weeks. Once again, zoning, if that's needed, that can affect the timeline. That's why you see the interior remodels be a little bit shorter than those exterior. To try and help you guys as applicants and us as reviewers, frankly, both Paul and I have created handouts. Those are listed on our website. We've tailored those handouts to be specific to the type of project. So for example, if you're building a new home or if you're building a minor addition, you can go get that specific handout and get all of the requirements that we're going to be looking for, as well as our building consultant and our engineering consultant. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Paul, and he's going to talk about some zoning code updates.
Good morning, everybody. As Ethan mentioned, just going to share with you the code amendments we have related to zoning code amendments, work plan for this year, 2020. The first is amendments related to the key. That is currently in process. We also have an amendment, again, this won't be a lot of you, but recreational structures. That primarily applies to private clubs and the two that may impact what the scope of work is for any particular job. We've heard a lot of feedback from our residents, and council's interested in having a discussion of what that ordinance currently is and what some options may be to that's in, so before city council at some point this I would anticipate if there are changes, I would anticipate that occur. And then the last one is some of you have lived this dream with both Ethan and I, is addressing accessory and residential zone district. Based on the zone district you're in, our largest, we have a prescriptive number of accessory structures, additional structures you can have, as well as what that total square footage can be. And we've heard feedback from some of our residents and some of our that that could be a potential area for us to have more if those requirements continue to meet. That likely is not for this year. I think it's going to depend on the paradigm. It's really more or less focused on having better definitions of what's an accessory structure, as well as how we measure how big that structure is, i.e., are we measuring the square footage of the building? That nature. So, depending on how you look at it, it could be what our main goal is going to be is whatever we recommend and is more reflective of the feedback we probably not necessarily more, but maybe more in how we classify.
Paul. So now we're digging into the really fun stuff. For those of you who aren't familiar with bulk plane is essentially your building envelope or the control measure of the massing of the structure. So in relation to setbacks, height, your grade, all of those factors create your bulk plane, which you'll see kind of in the background on the slide. That's a demonstration of, okay, this is where I'm allowed to build. And I speak for Paul and I when we know bulk plan can be hard. It's be hard to review, and it really depends on the lot you're dealing with. And we have some really unique shaped lots in Cherry Hills Village. So both of us want to encourage, if you are dealing with a unique situation, please don't hesitate to reach out to us, call us. We'd love to set up a meeting. In fact, we just had one this week where we can sit down, look at some plans, and help you with your bulk plane. What are we going to use at the front? What are we going to use rear and side? How do we measure maximum height? Those type of things per the specific lot. I'm going to go over them generally, just real here briefly. We're going to talk about front area depth versus rear area depth, bulk plane starting points of measurement, as well as some, we've seen some 3D imaging out there that's really helpful for both you guys as architects as well as us as reviewers. And there's a bulk plane handout. You guys have heard me talk a lot about handouts today, but there's a bulk plane handout for your use as well as on our website, cherryhillsvillage.com. So real fast, this is a perfect square lot where we don't see this a ton in Cherry Hills Village, but it's nice when we get to. So what you'll see, this is the aerial site plan view. The pink area is your front area depth. The blue area is your rear area depth. You'll see I'm going to use my cursor. I don't know how well you can see it, so I apologize. But you'll see on the top the rear setback, the left and right sides, the side setbacks, as well as the minimum front setback down at the bottom. You'll also see the maximum height box calculation that we use in Cherry Hills Village. The maximum height box calculation that we use in Cherry Hills Village. We do, and we've seen some confusion regarding additions on this. If you are doing an addition, please be sure to include that addition portion in the box calculation. Anything that's considered a portion of the home, we do need to be calculated within the max height. To calculate the max height, you're going to draw a box around that structure and then an X within that box, and then find your midpoint elevation, which is that right here. You'll see the center point in the, it just depends on where you're at in the lot and where the structure's at. It could end up at a grade point. It could end up in the middle of the structure. But that point is called your USGS natural grade point, midpoint elevation. That's what you're going to use to base your 30-foot or 35-foot height, depending on what zone district you're in, for your maximum height. So that's going to determine that very top of your bulk plane. You'll also see on your site plan, which we ask to provide, and we see as one of our most common comments, is the bulk plane points of measurement. We need the USGS elevations at each corner of the building envelope, as well as where the front area depth meets the rear area depth at each side setback. So you can see those as well in red at each corner, and then as well right here where that front area is meeting that rear area at that side setback. The bulk plane points of measurement can be a little bit confusing. It is dependent on the percentage of grade change along your side or along any setbacks, on which points you're using. If your grade is more than 7% change along any of those setbacks, you're going to end up using all 6 bulk plane USGS points of elevation. In other words, try to work with your grade change and allow you to use the front 2 points where that you'll see front 2 points along the front setback to help you with that grade change. If your grade change is less than 7%, which we see more common, you're going to use these 4, basically the back 4 USGS points of elevation. Those are the points where you're going to measure up your 21 foot if you're working with your front area, or if you're working with your rear area, you're 12.5 feet up. Saying that, we get into our 2D bulk plane elevation drawings. This is where we see the USGS points relative to the site plan. Please make sure that these points do match your site plan. Sometimes we see them a little mixed up, but you'll use the points, and if you can see, you're going to see the pink area, once again, is going to be your front area, representative bulk plane, and then this blue area is going to be your rear bulk plane. So you're going to use the USGS elevation point that corresponds. In this case, it's the left or right or the east or west side. For the front area, you'll go 21 feet up and then a 40-degree angle over to that calculated maximum height. So depending on the zone district, once again, it's going to be 30 feet or 35 feet. We do want that represented on the bulk plane elevation drawing, as you can see. For the rear area, we do want 12.5 feet up, 40-degree angle over to that same maximum height. The reason for the 21 versus the 12.5, the structure's massing should be the majority in that front area depth. Going to your side setback elevation views, you'll notice that that front area is a flat plane, as well as when you're dealing with the less than 7% grade change, you're going to use the USGS point where the front area meets the rear area at that front setback. And then you hit the rear where you're using that back rear, depending on the side, east or west, left or right, 12.5 feet up over 40 degrees to your maximum height. And then you'll do that for the back of the home, the rear elevation, south elevation, depending on what you're working with, as well as the other side of the home, east or west, left or right. So like I said, we've seen a lot of architects use 3D imaging to work with complicated lots because honestly, it's a better representation of the bulk plane, and 2D imaging can be really complicated and hard to represent with the bulk plane. So this is an example of what has been submitted. It's a 3D image showing the maximum height, the zone district, your 21 feet front area measurement up, your 12.5 feet rear area measurement up, 40 degrees, maximum height. I'm not going to lie, I would like more dimensions on this, but it's certainly helpful and recommended. I know it can be complicated for architects to do such an image, but we've seen more propose that to represent bulk plane. And then this is just a rear area view of the bulk plane, same property. With that, I'd like to open up for questions, and don't feel like you have to ask questions just on bulk plane. This is regarding zoning updates, permitting process, anything for our community development department. No, the 3D image is not in the bulk plane handout, but you make a good point. That's something we can certainly do. No, that's great, and we'll definitely take that into consideration, and that's a great point. Thank you for that.
To echo what Ethan said is, excuse me, we are seeing an increase in the calls for bulk plane. Primarily, I think, because it allows us pretty instantly to whether or not unique. When we get a set of 2D plans that are representing a 3D standard, it does take some new. Generally, we can review those faster.
We don't end up, when there's a complicated lot and there's some confusion, ask clarifying questions to make sure that 3D images cause those complications. Now, by no means is 3D required, but we see a lot of people use it because, yeah, it makes it a lot easier. And frankly, we hear from architects a lot. Their clients are on a timeline and they want to get going. They're excited to go, and it's going to help your timeline if. Any other questions?
I would support a request, which is invite that Ethan sent to you, as well as one of the handouts here. There is a survey on SurveyMonkey related to some of our services and timelines and that kind of stuff. We are genuinely interested in feedback related to that. Again, we want to make sure where Chris kicked it off, we're serving our customers, and sometimes the property owner, sometimes. So that information will help us continue to strive to provide. I hope it's come through. You've heard us all say, if you have questions, give us a call, stop in, schedule time with us, shoot us an email. Again, philosophically, our job is to make sure that the code doesn't mean we have to go through a nightmare process. We can spend an hour in a conference room. We'd rather do that than go through 10 different review cycles. An inconvenience to us. It's our help us help you.
And with resubmittals as well. Sorry, Chuck. We want to encourage you guys to reach out and ask questions of us or our consultants to help those resubmittals. We want you guys to feel like, all right, we submitted it. Questions. Get a comment sheet and have some questions. Want to make your resubmittal really good. The timeline goes faster for you. Please do so. We want to help.
And similar to that, Shelby has been spending some time in our office, I think Saturday afternoons. So if you like face great, and that would be helpful. Let either Ethan or I know, and we can.
Right. How we doing on break? I know we're running a little ahead of schedule. Are we good to dive into mechanical and energy? We need a short break. Okay, I think we're good. Gil, can you and Hope, can you hear me? Are you guys all set?
Yeah, I just need to get my act together here.
I'm going to stop sharing my screen, Gil, and you
Yeah.
can go ahead and share yours.
Yeah, once I get set, I will do that. Just gotta pull up the PowerPoint here. Give me a moment. Figured you're going to take a break and have 5 minutes, but we're good. Let's see. Present. Share screen, number 2. Check. All right, should be able to see the screen, eh?
Yep, we can see it. All right, you're off and running, Gil.
All right, sounds good. Thank you. All right, welcome everybody. Thanks for listening. So questions, please. We've got both Hope and I on here. If we've got specific questions, I'm just going to go through a bunch of typical comments that we make. that if you put these on your plans, and sometimes it's just as simple as a general note or coordinating some of the reports, it will end a lot of the back and forth. As Ethan has said and others have said, we're more than happy to have sidebar conversations. I just did a quickie review where somebody said a couple of details and I looked at it very quickly to say, yep, that'll work, and then get it back. So that, helps speed things along so you guys can get moving. So first, some common stuff we get on energy pieces, okay? It's really helpful to know the very first bullet point here, put on a little laser pointer here. First point here is, it's really nice to know how it is you're trying to find compliance, okay? If you're just doing prescriptive, right? I'm using the R value tables, just say it, I'm using the R value tables and we're moving on with life, okay? If you're doing, it should be total UA, not US. If you're providing a res check, that's fine. Res checks are not required. If you want to trade off your thermal envelope, that's what you use a res check for. Res check does not allow slab on grade trade-offs any longer. Never really should have, but Department of Energy finally caught up with us. Fixed res check, and it has now, that's the same for the 2018, and it'll be the same for the 2021 too. Then if we're actually doing any kind of simulated performance piece or energy rating index, make certain that we get those documents. And when I'm talking about those documents, the raters know, the folks that are actually creating these documents, know that there are two separate reports. There's one that we call the reference house. And so that's the quote house that's built as per code, okay? Then they have the way you're building your house. So we call that the proposed building. And we get this, what I call a from plans rating to make sure that we're looking at those things. So I make sure that, yes, they're using the right reference house, the right code addition, and that the R values and the U factors that they've used are the same ones that are shown on your construction plans. I'm telling you, if I've made that comment once, I probably make that comment almost every time, because what the designers will have a tendency to do is just reprint the prescriptive table on their plans, which is fine, but it just gives you all kinds of different options. What we're interested in is, how are you building your building? Okay, so if you're actually will give us the table of all the different ways that you can insulate, that's fine, but then provide another table that says, this is what we're doing in our building, okay? What we're trying to do is get rid of any confusion. See res check, oh my goodness sake. Wouldn't it be nice if the builders could hang on to the res check long enough to use it in there and have it there for the field inspection? Wouldn't it be nice if everything was coordinated on the construction plans themselves? So when I get a res check, I'm looking at the res check and the values, and I'm looking at the construction plans. And if they don't match, I'm going to make the comment. Okay, we got to make sure we're talking apples to apples. Description of the thermal envelope, a depiction, I guess, can be as simple as the sections you've already done for your house. Okay. What's important is that we have an idea is, are we conditioning the crawl space in the attic? Am I going to look for any duct losses in the HVAC calculations? Is the garage going to be heated or not? Okay. Cherry Hills, we've done a nice little policy statement there when we're heating garages, that many times we're just heating the garage just to keep the cars from freezing, right? So we cut you a little bit of slack in that we're not asking for the air permeability of the overhead garage doors, right? Which generally isn't really good. And we're not worried about slab on grade insulation. We're going to make you do the rest of it, decent windows, insulation in the walls and decent windows themselves, and an insulated garage door. And then just say, put a note on the plans and say, hey, we're going to set the thermostat so it doesn't go above 45 degrees. Okay. If you want to condition the garage, like it's going to be my shop, or, you know, maybe one day I'll turn it into the living room, probably not so much in Cherry Hills. But then we're going to make it come into compliance with the full code, just like it's a conditioned space in your living room, okay? Just provide a quick note of how we're doing our hot water piping insulation. Pretty much the hot water pipe's going to get insulated, and we just need a note that say, hey, this is the insulation we're going to provide, R3, and move on with life. Just a note, that's all we need. Yeah, and this is a simple note about all the headers and corners required to have
Gil.
Yes, you have a question?
Hey, Gil. Hey, real quick, I just wanted to go back to the garages. We do have a couple of them that are finishing garages right now.
Okay.
And if you're finishing an existing garage, you're going to have to make up for that slab on grade. So you either have to go 2 feet around the whole perimeter, or you can dig alongside the existing foundation on the exterior and put it out there. Then you got to protect. It's a pain in the you know what. But anyway, so if you're gonna finish a garage that's an existing garage, you're gonna run into some challenges.
Yeah, so you can certainly use a res check. Great point. Thank you, Chuck. You can certainly use a res check. You're just not going to be able to trade off the slab on grade. You may be able to reduce insulation in the attic or walls or U factor in your windows, but you're not going to trade off the slab on grade insulation. And he's right. That's a difficult task at best to come into a conditioned space, because the energy code says this is a unconditioned space now becoming conditioned. Okay, and the code says, hey, you're going to comply with new construction period, just like you would anything else. So, you know, right or wrong, good or bad, that's what it says. So we talked about R3. So what I've started doing is we need some kind of direction from the designer. I don't want the builders out there trying to figure out what an air barrier material is or isn't, or what the designer is going to create as their air barriers for their insulation types that they use. It's up to the designer. So I've been starting to put this link on the reviews where I don't see anything. You know, some people just put the table. They say, well, here's the table and go ahead and do it. Well, yeah, sort of. Picture is worth 1,000 words. And the best thing about it is once you create these details, you've got them for life. It's not like this air barrier stuff hasn't changed in many code cycles. It just gets more and more detailed as to what it is always intended from the beginning. Okay, the link here is actually to the CAD details that the Department of Energy has put together, PNNL. They're all free. So they got CAD details, all different stuff in there. So you can go there, copy and paste one in your plans. There's no copyright, there's no nothing. And they're just generic details. And that's all we're looking for. So it gives everybody the idea that when we get into a specific situation out in the field, we have at least an idea of what the intent is. What are we intending to do here? Okay. Yeah, just interrupt me if somebody raises their hand or something, or has got a question. Then just a quick note on the electrical plans, or if you want to create just an energy sheet, that's perfectly fine too, and have all these notes on an energy sheet, that works for me. Just 90% of the lamps, right, going to have high efficacy lamps. Get a lot of unvented attics here. Probably the biggest thing is that there's several different ways to do that. Okay, and I keep referencing this R805.5. The key is that we've got to have at least an R20 of air impermeable insulation, so foam. Okay, and it needs to be a class 2 vapor retarder. Okay, so the closed cell is generally class 2, but we just need to make the statement on the plan. So when we get halfway through spraying this foam and then realize it doesn't meet the code, that's tough. We don't want to go down that road at all. Next thing here is just talking about what type of insulation are we using. So this kind of gets back to, don't tell me what the options are, tell me what you're doing in your house. How is it you want this house built? You're the designer, you tell the builder, you tell us. And they just got to match. I don't know how many times it seems like you've done an HVAC design and you've changed the house, but we didn't go back to tell the designer that we changed. and a lot of times things don't match. And believe it or not, that's all I'm looking for. I mean, there's other things, but that's probably one of the bigger pieces. We just need to see apples to apples so that.
Time out. I got a good question here.
Yep.
Once we get, like, if we have a res check or whatever, if you decide you're gonna change horses in the middle of the stream, you better make sure it's okay. I've got a project right now, they decided to change the windows, and they had used windows to make up, the rob Peter to pay Paul. They decided to use these cheaper windows, better windows, to make the res check work. Well, they found some nicer windows that they liked better, and they went ahead and bought those, and they're not the .22 that the original ones are, and it's gonna be a pain, it really is. So I can't stress enough that once you get this all okayed and everything, and then your owner comes up and say, I don't like those windows, I want different windows, better make sure that, they're gonna meet the requirements. So I just have a project right now, it's gonna go to the Board of Appeals, I know it will.
Wow. Yeah, that's tough. Yep. If you did a res check and you may end up doing another one, and when you get through, 2/3 of the way through a project, that's really, really tough to change. It really is. Best to have us take a quick look at that prior to changing. Okay. Word to the wise. Very good, Chuck. Thank you. Domestic water heating. Couple of different things that come into that. And kind of these next two bullet points work together. Domestic water heating is, generally speaking, all I'm looking for is what kind of water heater are you using? Is it going to require combustion air? Is it a naturally drafted water heater? I don't think most people in Cherry Hills are using those. Maybe power vented and sealed combustion type or tankless type water heaters. Might even be going to these heat pump water heaters. But a couple of different things here. It's am I using a recirc system? Am I doing a recirc line or not? Then we just need to look at the section there in the energy code that talks about, well, what kind? Is it a recirc? Is it on demand? Am I insulating the pipes? Do we have a return pipe that needs to be insulated? Is it using the cold water to be the return line? So it gives you just choices, okay? Best to try to figure out what we're going to do beforehand. Then this ties into this next section because the 2018 changed. So in the 2015, it just basically said, hey, you have an exhaust hood that's over 400 CFM. By golly, you're going to put in a makeup air system. What the 18 said is that then the whole reason behind that code to begin with was to stop things from backdrafting. Okay, so like a naturally drafted water heater or even a power vented water heater. So when you turn on these big exhaust fans, it puts the house under some negative pressure and it's sucking the CO stuff, the nasty stuff you don't want to breathe, and makes you die kind of stuff. So it doesn't happen. So what 18 did is says, hey, you know what? Essentially, if it's a sealed combustion appliances in there, you don't have to worry about it. Now, a word to the wise, and I'm sure many of you know this, that a lot of the very large exhaust fans you guys put in won't work unless you put in some type of makeup air system, okay? It'll pull that house negative so quickly, and there's not enough air in that building for it to move 1200 CFM. Just, it won't work. So providing a tempered makeup air system, because you start bringing in, 10-degree air, people are just going to start to scream. You can't bring it into your furnaces because they won't heat the air, not at 1200 CFM, that's for sure. So just a word to the wise, because if I see something like that and it's tied into the furnace, I will definitely ask, so have you been able to maintain the manufacturer's minimum return air temperature with the 1200 CFM -1 air, okay? So tempered, if they're wanting to, build a 1200 CFM fan, I suspect they can afford an electric fired makeup air heater too. Anyway, okay, moving on. Okay, HVAC stuff, getting a little bit more technical here. Probably the number one comment. Manufacturers expanded performance data for everything that all the heating and cooling appliances. I've got a few designers now that have gotten it, that I get it. But I make that comment almost every review. Okay, so what we're looking for is, gas-fired furnaces are going to tell me what the duration for altitude is. They're going to tell me what the CFM is and what the temperature rise is going to be based on the CFM, based on the size of the furnace, based on what the efficiency is, and static, CFM and static pressures. And for air conditioning equipment, it's important to get the expanded performance data because the AHRI data that the software knows isn't correct. It's not correct for what we're designing for, certainly not in Colorado. So the AHRI data seems like their capacity is higher than it really is, okay? So oversizing seems to be the issue, but the guys that are getting better at it, undersizing could be an issue too, and that we do not want to have happen. Details, whole house mechanical ventilation system. It seems like I get an answer. Well, it's in the mechanical. It's in the HVAC design stuff. Well, yeah, maybe. Okay. If you're providing an HRV or an ERV, you need to state it on the plans. And the other piece that we need to know, okay, is the HRV standalone, meaning it's not tied into the ductwork for the furnace itself. Okay, so we need to know that, because the HVAC calcs can take that into consideration, right? They can say, oh, well, I've got an HRV and it's pumping air back into my return here, but that has been recovered. I only have to reheat that about 30% because 70% has been taken care of. Those things, HRVs are like 70% efficient. And so it's not like we've got all this cold air being sucked into it, okay? If you're providing an exhaust-only type system, that the designer needs to know too, because then we're not bringing in any extra outside air. We're not bringing in any air that the furnace has to recondition, okay? It's not directly from the outside and it's not from an HRV. The system or the software is going to look at it as infiltration, okay? Because that's what an exhaust system is, isn't it? You turn on the exhaust fan, it's just sucking air through the walls, through the holes you didn't intend to leave. So that's an important detail to know. So make sure that your folks are coordinated as to what kind of a whole house mechanical ventilation system I'm going to use, how it's going to be implemented, and how it's dealt with in the calcs, because I can tell what they've done in the calcs. Fitting IDs. So as long as we can get a picture of the ducts that the fittings they've used in the field for Doug or whoever the guys are in the field there doing the inspections, they're going to need that. So in the fitting ID on the duct plans itself. So the size of the registers, the size of the ducts, and the duct fitting ID number. So they can just look and they just look at the picture and look to see what they put in. Because if they don't, I've got a lot of guys that are just designers. They're not actually the installers. And so if the design works, well, it ain't gonna work if you don't use the same fittings. And if the designer designs it and doesn't install it, they don't have any clue what's going on in the field. So that's why we've got to have that stuff. The project summary report, that's just the name of it. Many guys are using RightSoft. And that is just a really nice, concise report that I can tell a lot from very quickly. I don't have to go searching through all the pages. So it's important that we have what is titled the project summary report. Crawl space supplied with condition including return air. Didn't see any of that. That's another thing we deal with, it seems like. How are we dealing with the crawl space? How are we ventilating it? Most times, this is great, you guys are doing what the code calls unvented crawl spaces, but we need to provide some kind of ventilation. Clearly, we're not just sealing up and not doing anything. So it's important we get that coordinated and how that's working. So if the HVAC person and design and saying, well, we're actually going to design it as a short basement. They design it just like a short basement and they get supply and returns in there, no problem. Okay. They just need to know that. Okay. Or am I doing an exhaust only piece? Right? Sucking the air from the house through the crawl space and exhausting outside, then it actually works for both. It ventilates my crawl space and it provides my whole house mechanical ventilation system. Right? Two birds from one stone. Vented attic and duct losses, heat gains or losses. Again, this just comes back with drawing your thermal envelope so everybody understands what's inside and what's outside. So if you got ducts or anything in the attic, that's fine. The code allows it, but you're going to have some significant heat gains and heat losses easily. It also means that you're going to have to test the ductwork. You're going to have to do a duct tightness test, and that's going to be the 21 will be a change. Just to give you a heads up, all ducts will be tested in the 21 code, regardless of where they are located, which is a good thing. People find out how good they've done. Oh yeah, crawl space, yeah. I don't see this very often, but it's like, okay, well the plans are, right? Calculations like showing that we've got crawl spaces, but the plans are slab on grade. Clearly something happened somewhere. Designer didn't get a chance to redo it. Let's see, water heat gun, yeah, we did that one. Oh yeah, it looks like you just got a couple of, that's the same thing. We don't have to talk about that, but this is another piece that it seems like I've had kind of debates with several different folks there. I have to say that most of the time, there are some windows that will never have any kind of overhangs or blinds or drapes or anything ever on them, right? It's the picture window that sees the mountains as an example. Then I suspect that there are many rooms, like bedrooms, for instance, that will almost always have blinds and or curtains or overhangs. Okay? These are important details in the HVAC design. Okay, solar heat gain is a big deal for air conditioning. Okay, big deal. And I give them I take them right to the manual J, right into where it says, hey, these are mandatory requirements when I'm doing a manual J, which is the heat gain and heat loss calculation to do. So you're going to have windows maybe that, hey, right, has it, but hey, right, if it doesn't, that's okay too. What I get is that all the windows in the house don't have any wall or any coverings in any way, shape, or form, which I think is unrealistic. Not typical. And this just kind of gets back into what I was talking before, kind of the comment that I make when it says exhaust only. They have a load in there with, what the software calls a central vent load. That says if I'm bringing the air directly, either unconditioned air or air that's gone through an HRV that goes into return air and then is reconditioned before it is then supplied to the rest of the house. And there's a way in the software that you can do that. It's not difficult. You just got to know where to do it. And I'm more than happy to help folks that at least use Wrightsoft do it. Not familiar with anything else, but I'm familiar enough with those to help them out. Other than that, that's all I had. So do we have any questions? Do you want to open up the 21 code and see what that looks like? What would you like to do? Questions?
We're going to open it. Sorry, Gil. We're going to open it up for questions, and I know we have one at least, so.
All right.
I got actually two questions for you. On the right, or the manual.
Yeah.
Looking for a particular sensible heat ratio on those?
Well, the sensible heat ratio is always, the calculated sensible heat ratio will always be 1, okay? Because we have no calculated latent load, right? So am I looking for something particular? No. I'm looking for whatever it is that you've picked for equipment, right? So you're never going to find equipment. You're never going to find an appliance, air conditioning appliance that's going to have a sensible heat ratio of 1. It's not going to happen, okay? What you do have to remember, though, is that manual S, there's a couple of different ways to take and do that into account, okay? Most guys are increasing their CFM at altitude to get the air conditioner to work using the density ratio there, which means we're moving a lot of air. So we're moving, instead of 400 tons or 400 CFM a ton, it's closer to 500, easy 500 to 600 CFM per ton. What that means is that in manual S, it says that, you know what, I can easily take half the excess sensible capacity and turn it into, latent capacity and turn it into sensible. Because right now we're just trying to, cool the air down, the heat part of it. We're not doing a lot of condensating, turning in vapor into water. I mean, we get some condensate, there's certainly water running out of the pipe there, but it's not like, we're really humid, like it would be in Iowa or Florida, for instance. So a lot of designers, don't take that into account, and they have a tendency to oversize the air conditioner when the capacity is usually fine. So as far as sensible heat ratio, calculated, it's always 1, but the equipment, you might get down to a 0.8 maybe. Does that answer the question? Is that what you were after, or did I just blather on for nothing?
That was good. I just have been
Good. What else?
Ms. Kirkpatrick at Excel for the
Okay, I'm not hearing you.
I said that some of the Excel submittals
What about
less
Excel?
than 1. Yeah.
Okay, so when you say
I was saying that for the Excel rebate program last year, we were getting issues. Ms. Kirkpatrick was not a fan of using 1. She wanted us to have it lower than that. So I was seeing if there was any sort of
got it. Well, they need to understand that that's where we are in the country, and it's unique, right? It's only in dry climates where you end up with that, right? And so I'm not sure what they are looking for. Are they looking for the calculated sensible heat ratio, or are they looking for the sensible heat ratio that your air conditioner ends up being?
I don't remember the exact numbers, but it's somewhere in like point. I wanted to make sure that whatever we're submitting to you guys is
Yeah, what you're submitting, I mean, I have not had any issues with that. I mean, there are places in the software, not to get too much into the weeds, but there are defaults within the software that try to do a manual S to try to figure out how big the air conditioner needs to be. And a lot of times they're seeing that the default is a 0.7. Well, that's ridiculous. That's not the case. 30% is not latent and 70% is not sensible. Like I say, it's going to be closer to 85 when you get down to the equipment. So I pretty much agree with that.
I had one last question, and that was
yes, go ahead.
When will you guys be adopting the requirements for ER 2 and CR 2?
Well, the code will not be doing that, because that's federally regulated stuff. Yes, you're talking about the refrigerant or the efficiency.
The efficiency changes where they're going to be.
That's going to be based on the federal government. We are not going to set any kind of efficiency standards. Whatever the federal government says, that's what we do, because the code, as a federal government law, we can't mandate that. We could mandate it as an option, but we can't make it a requirement. So whenever you guys can't buy the stuff anymore, usually when they do that, all the other efficiencies you can buy until they sell out, right? You just can't manufacture them anymore. So we'll just go with the flow on that one.
Very much.
Sure, you bet. What else?
Hey, Gil, why don't you touch on real quick, just what is updated in the 2021, just to highlight.
Well, so probably the biggest change is the thermal envelope values. That's the single biggest change. And it There are some things that aren't so big, and there's other things that are bigger. So as an example, there is a cavity only option. The nice thing, there's a cavity only option, a cavity plus exterior insulation only option, and there's a exterior insulation only option. So you've got all kinds of different options. The trouble is that in Climate Zone 5, the cavity only option is R30. I don't know that anybody's going to be doing that. Okay, so I think that going to find that, I'm going to try to pull it up here. I don't know why it's just not right in front of me. Let me pull it up here quick, and we'll look at that table real quick here in the 2021. I had it up earlier, but clearly it's gone. And then I'll pull it over to the screen so you can see it.
I've also heard R60 in the attic.
Yeah, R60 in the attic is another one. And I will get here, give me a minute. I'm working on a couple of different screens here. I'll get to the one that we want. Okay, how about that? Okay, you should be able to see that now, huh? Okay, so here is the new table. You can see it, yes?
Yes, we can see it.
Yeah.
It's on the screen.
Yeah, so here's our climate zone stuff. So you got 0.3 for your fenestrations, not a change there. We do have a solar heat gain coefficient now, so I don't know that I'd worry so much about that. All the windows are meet that simple. R60 in the ceiling. Thing that you'll have to worry about there is if you use blown-in cellulose in your attic, you're going to have to go to 5/8 sheetrock. If you use blown-in fiberglass stuff, you should be okay. It only takes, so many pounds per square foot. That's one bad thing there. And then here's your choices. You got R30 cavity or 20 plus 5, 13 plus 10, or 0 plus 20, meaning continuous insulation on the outside. Floor stayed at 30. This varied a little bit, 13 and 17 for your mass wall. Not a lot of guys are doing mass wall. You got 15 continuous R19 or 13 plus 5 on our basement walls. So they've got a little bit of variation there now for that. Slab depth, yeah, 10, that doesn't seem right. Oh, crawl space, that's the one I was thinking of there. I thought that went to 15. This is the third. Now this is the PDF. I might have to go. I think this might, that I think is 15 now. I don't think this table is correct. This is not a real recent PDF, but this gives you a good shot of what's happening. Okay. The other thing that's big is additional efficiency options, like we had in air barriers are the same. Let's see if I can get there quicker. About oh, there we go. So you have choices here. Yeah. So like in the commercial code, residentially, we've got to do one of these, okay? So you've got this enhanced envelope piece, yeah, more efficient. So to earlier question about efficiencies, here's this option piece. We can't mandate it, but we can say it's an option. You've got reduced energy option here for your water heating, service water heating option. You've got this one here, which for some of you will be the one to use. It just talks about more efficient duct thermal distribution. And it just says 100% of the ducts and air handles located within thermal envelope. So for those of you that don't have unvented attic assemblies and conditioned crawl spaces, this would work. Then this is hydronic and ductless type systems for those of you doing maybe hot water heat. If it's all inside, you're good to go.
And once again, Gil, it does say options, but you have to choose one of
You
those
have to choose
options.
one. Yes.
You have to use one.
You got to pick one of these. And I'm just trying to, point out that some of you might be doing this, right? More efficient HVAC because that's what you're doing anyway, right? You might be putting in a more efficient type water heating type option because you're doing it anyway, which there will be. You could be doing one of these easily, okay? Very possible. Here, some of you are actually using HRVs and ERVs already, okay? So here it just says, hey, you're going to be less than 3 ACH 50, and I have no idea what your ACH 50 numbers have been, but I got a feeling they're less than 3 ACH 50 because, well, 3 ACH 50 is the max you can be. So I suspect you are less. Here it's just saying, hey, put in a HRV or an ERV and is at least 75% sensible, which most of them are. I don't think it would be difficult to see that. So I'm saying, at least in Cherry Hills, a lot of the things that I see that are just standard for you guys, you already do anyway, right? So I'm thinking that these some will fit. I don't know that you're going to have to go to any extent to meet that. Production builders, on the other hand, are going to have a time getting used to this. Custom guys like yourselves, integrating one of these things, I don't think will be particularly difficult. What else?
Do they need to state on the plans, or is that on the manual J where it says?
Well, no, it'll be stated on the plans.
Package.
You'll have to state on the plans what it is we're doing. And then if it happens to be, right, something that's more efficient, like a more efficient HVAC, then I'll just verify that, hey, it's, X. It's got to be, right, 95% on the 16 SEER air conditioner. Or if, hey, I'm using a fairly efficient hot water or a water heater, then we'll just need to verify what it is you're installing, right?
Yeah, it's all in the description, guys. I have one project that I've probably gone at least 3 rounds with, and they finally have told me, since I told them if it's going to be a sleeping bedroom, a room used for a bedroom, you have to sprinkle it. I finally told them that, and then they said, oh, we're not using it for a bedroom. Let us know what's going on the plans. I mean, especially if there's at least one architect out there, really give us a good description, here's what we're doing, here's what we're replacing, and I go to that and I cut through. Sometimes I go to even the description on the permit application says interior remodel, and it's where's Waldo? Finding Waldo takes time.
Yeah, so I gave Ethan some handouts that we created for Excel that deals with the 21 code and both commercial and residential. Just talked about the different submittal requirements. So he's got that, and I gave him a PDF so you guys can print them or he can send them out to you. And if you've got any questions, don't hesitate. Don't hesitate to give me a buzz. Send me an email, or better yet, ask Chuck.
Yeah, I'm pretty dangerous when it comes to electrical and HVAC.
What else, guys?
Any other questions? All right, I think that wraps up your portion, Gil, and we do have those handouts out on the table right over here, as well as on our website. So if you didn't pick one up or don't want to, you can get them electronically on our website as well.
Perfect. All right. Then I am going to sign off. We're good.
That sounds great, Gil. Thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Gil.
Talk to you guys later.
That wraps up all of our presentations for today. But once again, I don't want anybody to feel like this is your one and only opportunity for questions. If you have questions for any of the reviewers, presenters that you saw today, heard today, please don't hesitate to reach out. Their contact information is on their presentations, which we'll post on our website as well. This meeting, as stated at the beginning, has been recorded and will be on our website. So if you didn't remember every single detail sitting right here, then you can go back and listen to it again. Once again, thank you all very much for coming. I was pleased with the turnout, and I appreciate you guys coming and listening and willing to learn. Once again, it's only meant to help you, and it only helps us. And I just like seeing you guys. It's nice to put the faces to the names and the emails that I see. So once again, thank you very much. Otherwise, everybody enjoy the rest of your day. If there's no...
Just real quick.
Oh, yeah.
This is something, barring another pandemic, that we will do every year. So if there's other specific things that you would be interested in hearing about, or different things we can do to make this more valuable in your day, please let us know that too.
Yeah, the more feedback, the better, because then we can cater it more towards what you guys want. So, yep, CCICC. The goal is later this summer, right, Chuck?
Steve and I were just talking about it during one of the breaks. Probably won't be until...
Yeah, we still got to go through, and by we, I mean our building consultant, go through the code, see what amendments, if any, we want. Yeah, we're a unique community. So if you guys have any feedback, suggestions, please send those our way. Any other comments, questions? All right. Well, thank you so much, and enjoy the rest of your day. Appreciate it.